Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first. It's August 21st, 2024. I'm Ryan Balgi. It has been a minute. There's lots to talk about. Plenty to talk about golf, plenty to talk about life. We haven't done a show in a couple of weeks. Just first want to say thanks for hopping on, whether you're watching live stream, catch us after the fact, audio, video, however you're enjoying us. Thanks for making me part of your day. I appreciate that. So, haven't done a show in probably two and a half weeks, live show at least. And the reason for that is travel mostly, but there's another reason too. We're working on GNN TV. Almost to the finish line. We have what they call basically a send order in place with our partner for the TV side. And they're getting everything ready to go out to our streaming services. And then once that goes out, we'll actually start GNN TV. So that little miscommunication there, unfortunately, it'll buy us a couple extra weeks of time to get everything ready. But the good news is GNN TV will be live well before the Solheim Cup, which is going to be our kind of first big event that we do live shows from. We're going to have a lineup for you of talk shows each day, and they'll expand out the course of the fall and then into 2025, but I'll be leading the way at the outset. We're going to do live versions of the other show that I will do on the GNN TV station called The Breakfast Ball. That will be live from, well, we won't call it live from, that's against Golf Channel, but they'll be live at the Solheim Cup, and then we will do the following week, basically, at the Korn Ferry Tour Championship out at French Lick, Indiana. So from French Lick, we'll be doing that as well. Then we're looking at a couple of other tournaments to do over the course of the fall, perhaps one of the LPGA, perhaps one related to the greatest of all time. So we'll leave it at that for now. We'll see what happens there. Very excited about all of that. Get that out to you, bring it to you, share it with the world. More news on that in the probably 10 days, 14 days, once we finally have everything ready on that end. Also, we're presented by friends at Swannies. Check them out, swannies.co. Use that promo code GolfNewsNet25 and save 25% off your first order. Great to have them back for another year as a big sponsor of our show. And now that you actually can see when I wear the clothes, that will be great too. So let's talk about a couple of things here. We won't rehash the last couple of weeks. We're not even going to rehash Memphis too much. But what I would like to start with actually is an article from the Financial Times. And I was reading this yesterday. I was flying home from London. So my wife is a big Taylor Swift fan. My kids love Taylor Swift. They wanted to go see Taylor Swift at the Eras Tour before the tour ended. And as it turns out, it is more financially reasonable to go overseas to see Taylor Swift and buy the tickets and the airfare than to do it in the United States. It's like $2,500 to get in the door in the Indianapolis concert, which is unbelievable to me. Nowhere near that, not even close to that, to get into the doors at Wembley Stadium to go see Taylor Swift. So they went to go see her. I hung out in a pub in the Paddington area just outside of London. Had a great time. Walked around the city. We hit pretty much everything. If you want to follow my Instagram at Ryan Balgi, you can see that stuff if you want to see London things. If not, hey, I don't care. That's up to you. But so reading on the plane yesterday, we're coming back and saw this story retweeted by Amy Lynch from Golf Week and Golf Channel. And it was a story looking into the financial interests of Saudi Arabia and more specifically, the Public Investment Fund. And the Public Investment Fund's enormous portfolio. I mean, they have not the estimate in the article, I believe, was $950 billion US, which is nothing to sneeze at, obviously, nearly $1 trillion. And kind of the need, as the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, believes, is to take some of that money that used to be just kind of doled out with a decent enough business plan and starting to have more requirements on it, not only in terms of financial return, but in terms of return to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And that may mean the era of free Saudi money is over. And if not being over now, it's going to be over really soon. And that will cause a readjustment of what the Saudis invest in through the Public Investment Fund. What's left out of the story, frankly, is just as interesting as what's in it. And what's really included in it is talk of investments in a variety of things, right? The Saudis have put money in a lot of different things. They've put money into projects to try to bring tourism to Saudi Arabia. So, for example, Neom, the city that they want to build in the middle of the desert, well, not the middle of the desert, it's more like the western corner of the desert that they have. And the idea of having the line and all these different ski resort in the desert, all this stuff that costs billions upon billions of dollars, probably is going to cost trillions of dollars if it ever comes to total fruition. And that amount of money is dragging down the liquidity of the Saudi government, the liquidity of the Saudi Public Investment Fund. They've been running budget deficits for a long time. A lot of this is political stuff. I realize I'm a political geek, so I find it interesting. And budgeting geek, I find that interesting. But the bottom line to all of that is it affects golf fans one way or the other, is that they may not be as willing to put money toward things that don't have, one, a good return, and two, mean something to the people of Saudi Arabia other than dollars, right? And LIV Golf kind of fits in that. And related categories talked about in the Financial Times story include the Saudis divesting their interest in Carnival Cruise Line, which they had a pretty sizable stake in it. They got rid of that. They're working their way through trying to divest themselves of some other things, while at the same time, they still have a lot of interest in bringing sport and tourism to Saudi Arabia. So they've invested in sports stadiums. They've put a lot of money into getting WWE to come several times a year, to have UFC events, to try to host the World Cup, the FIFA World Cup in like 2034 or something like that. They're trying to kind of bring a lot of events to Saudi Arabia. But LIV Golf only has one event in Saudi Arabia, and it's in King Abdullah Economic City. It is not very well attended, and it's not particularly well supported by the community. So it doesn't drive tourism to the region. People aren't going to go see a LIV Golf event in Saudi Arabia when they could go see one if they wanted in Australia, the most popular event, or Singapore, or the bunch in America, or the one in the United Kingdom. There's one in Spain. Like, take your pick, right? So the LIV Golf is not bringing in, one, a return. I mean, there's basically zero return, all things being equal. And then there's not really a tourism boom to it. So even if you were to kind of lump golf investments in with their other sporting investments, at least people show up to Saudi Arabia to attend those sporting events. So that part of all, trying to read through all of the lines of the FT story is, okay, well, what does that mean for LIV Golf? If LIV doesn't create a return and it doesn't bring anything back to Saudi Arabia in terms of economic development, investment, corporate investment, any of those types of things, why keep spending the money on it? And I think that's the implication there from the entire story. If you're viewing it through a golf prism, is, are the Saudis getting ready to say sayonara to LIV Golf? And of course, they may not. They could change their mind. Even if they had one opinion today, they could change it tomorrow, right? They're the people in charge. They're the investor. They're the benefactor. So they can pull the plug at any time. The really interesting thing about this comes in the context of where they are in terms of the development of LIV Golf, the existence of LIV Golf. This is the third season of LIV Golf, right? There was a LIV Invitational Series. They like to call that year zero, but it was a year, right? They had events in 2022, 23, and 24. So this is the third year of operation for this concept. They have played more than 100 rounds now, which is their kind of big thing, even though it's not divisible by 3, but 100 is an even number. So they're now at the point where they've played 34 tournaments, right? And as they cross that threshold, now they've got to think about, what do they do from here to grow as an entity, to kind of, they talked about the last tournament, the Greenbrier, which by the way is up for auction in a few weeks time, I believe. And the players are talking about, oh, we've done so much in 100 rounds and blah, 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 blah. And we can't wait for the next 100 and it's going to be incredible and all of this stuff. And I just don't get the sense that they really believe it. Like, I mean, I understand obviously the players who have made a tremendous amount of money off of this, they feel like they've changed golf, right? They've injected a ton of money into the PGA Tour as a result. PGA Tour is changing its business model. All of that stuff has happened in large part because LIV Golf came along, right? So that what they're saying isn't necessarily false. I'm not saying that at all. They have brought about change. However, it really hasn't changed professional golf, except for perhaps the worst. And that's where the ratings come in. The ratings for LIV Golf at the Greenbrier were horrible. I mean, something like 160-ish thousand people watched both the third round, or second round and the third round. And the third round, by the way, resulted in a playoff between two of the best players on the planet, Jon Rahm and Brooks Koepka. Koepka won in the playoff. And yet, even still, hardly anyone paid attention. Now, yes, there are other things going on, right? You got other stuff happening. Caitlin Clark was playing basketball. You got the PGA Tour, but the PGA Tour ratings were down miserably bad from last year when, of all people, Lucas Glover won. It was closer to 3 million last year. Now that went late, right? They had a weather delay, and eventually Lucas Glover got the win. So having that in prime time helped those numbers pretty substantially. But even if you took that out, the audience decline from 2023 in Memphis to this year is pretty substantial, and it's not great. And we've seen that in the last several events. We saw that in the Olympic tournament, a pretty dramatic decrease in viewership, something like 20%. We've seen that decrease at the Wyndham Championship. The 3M Open's always kind of a weird tournament because it's just kind of thrust in the middle of no man's land between the Open and the playoffs. And so you've got this run of bad data about PGA Tour interest. You've got this run of bad, finally got a data point about where people are with LIV in terms of viewership. That's bad. I don't care. Under 200,000 is horrible for the quality of player that you have there. It's clearly not resonating with people. So from the FT article into this, you go, okay, well, maybe we just pull the plug on this. Like contracts expire after this year and next year. And there's a 5-year deal out there as well. So you've got a 3-year deal, you got 4-year deals, you got 5-year deals. Well, all of those players know they're not going to be able to re-sign with LIV for nearly the same amount of money that they did in the first place by taking the lead. In fact, it might even be, I'm guessing this, but let's just say 25% of the money. Might even be way less than that. They might just say, okay, you can sign to continue to play, or we'll just go find other people. But I don't think they're going to throw another $500 million at signing bonuses for players when they've netted basically no money back to them. I mean, they're just hemorrhaging money. So players who have played in LIV and their contracts are coming to a decision or close, they have to decide, hey, do I want to continue my career playing in tournaments where you have a friendly schedule, right? And you've got $20 million purses. Those are certainly things, $25 million purses, certainly things to have available, right? But at what cost? Because you toil in relative anonymity. You may or may not really ever have a chance to win if it's a 10-person tour. I mean, there are a lot of potential negatives by continuing with LIV. At the same time, if you leave, you've got to go get a PGA Tour card back or a DP World Tour card back. And you're not playing for nearly the same amount of money on the DP World Tour. Most weeks, 10% of the LIV purses. On the PGA Tour, the structure is about to change again. And it's already changed. So you've got to get into the top 50 to really give yourself a chance to get access to the big money events. So that means at least one season of playing in none of them or hardly any of them. That's certainly a consideration for a player on the downside of their career. For players like Poulter and Westwood and Stenson and Mickelson, guys that are in their 40s and 50s, like, hey, maybe I can just be done here. Maybe they have to consider, can they go back and go play the Champions Tour? That's something to think about. I think there's a lot here going on that we haven't really talked about because LIV just kind of exists. And it's not particularly controversial from one day to the next anymore. But what happens from here really depends on a lot of things. And the first has to deal with what the Saudis think about the future of this as it relates to all of their other investments and projects and goals. And then what the players think about the prospect of playing for less guaranteed upfront money, and who knows what the investment will be in the purses in the future. And knowing that whatever equity they have in these team concepts probably is not worth much more than what the paper it's written on. It's an interesting time. Now, as I say that, the PGA Tour sounds like it's about to change again. So Adam Schupak did a story about this today, updated it. The vote has not happened yet on this proposal, but it sounds like it will eventually. It may not happen today, but it could happen soon. And that is the story of a coming change to the PGA Tour eligibility rules and what that means to the notion of an all-exempt tour. Now, this started to kind of trickle out in March, thanks to Wyndham Clark and Rory McIlroy and some other players to a degree. You kind of talked about wanting to have fewer players on the PGA Tour, wanting to have fewer exempt players on the PGA Tour, fully exempt at least, and having smaller fields. And it sounds like we're going down that path. And that's not going to happen for next year because the schedule's already been released. The fall's already been set up. It's too late to do anything for 2025. However, it does sound like there's going to be a substantial change in the number of totally exempt players on the PGA Tour. The idea of the 125 sounds like it's going by the wayside. And while it may be stagnated and implemented over the course of 1, 2, 3 seasons, sounds like we're going to a world where instead of the top 125, it'll be the top 100. Top 100 players will be exempt. They'll have tour status for the entire year. And instead of having events with 156, 144 players, you're going to have events with 120 and 132 players, maybe even down to that 100 number. But it sounds like you're looking more like a 120, 132 number. And that way you'll have smaller fields at pretty much every event. And the reason for that is a couple of different things. One, there's a lot of bloat, right? I mean, no offense to players who are 101st to 125th on the PGA Tour. It is incredible what you've accomplished, and you are a remarkable player to have done that. However, those players don't draw. And what we have also seen this year in particular is a lot of Korn Ferry Tour players who got their cards this past year through the Korn Ferry Tour Championship really struggled to keep status this year. So there's a lot of flux, which means if there's a lot of flux, why are you going to allow those players to continue to be fully exempt or even kind of scrape at it if they're going to struggle? And that's not a knock on the Korn Ferry Tour at all. That's just the reality of it. So you could still have, 30 players who come in through the Korn Ferry Tour. They're not fully exempt. They have some kind of status category. You got 100 fully exempt players because they're not subject to reshuffle. And then you go from there, right? And you're still going to have plenty of players to play. You're still going to have plenty of opportunities to play. Just the way that you have access to a fully exempt card is going to change. Now, the thing that I thought was most interesting, what Adam wrote, is this insinuation that if they go to a tour with smaller fields, right, 120 and 132, instead of 144 and 156, and you have 100 exempt players, there may be a world where the signature events have more players in them. Instead of having 70 players, and now they're trying to have 78 at a minimum, maybe you have those events have 90 players in them. You get most of the exempt players in, or 100 players, whatever. But you bring in more opportunities for the fully exempt tour to qualify for those signature events. What I would volley back with is to say, all right, if you qualify for the playoffs, you could get in, let's say, every signature event that's not a player invitational and the Century. So let's say you got into the top 70, you get into the Travelers, the Heritage, the new championship in Charlotte, the Truist, the new name for the Wells Fargo, except it's going to be in Philadelphia next year. Those tournaments, you're going to get in them, right? But you won't get into the Century. That's for the top 50. You won't get in Tigers, Jacks, or Arnie's tournament. That's for the top 50. Like you limit it pretty hard. And then you have your different criteria for that to get to 78 players or something like that. And then you have your cutoff for the playoffs. But that 70 still means that's still a big number. But what you turn the Wyndham Championship to instead is not the cutoff for the playoffs. I mean, that it will be that, but it will also turn into a more dramatic cutoff for the fully exempt. Maybe you do something like that. I don't know. Or you turn the fall into, okay, we've got 70 players. Now you're playing for 30 spots. Maybe you do that. So you have 30 spots that are fully exempt through the fall. And you just kind of maybe start brand new. I don't know. But there are a lot of different ways to do that. I think this is the right thing for a variety of reasons. One, economic, right? Two, pace of play. You have these 144 and 156 player tournaments that often fail to get rounds done in rounds 1 and 2 because there are too many players, they play too slow, and then it spills over and it just creates a backlog of problems and operational logistical issues. You can eliminate those by just having fewer players in the field. And no offense to the players that would miss out on those starts, but from the fan perspective, you probably won't notice a lot of them. So get a little bit crueler, get a little bit tougher. Maybe take some of that SSG money and invest it into the Korn Ferry Tour. Have those purses be worth more like $2 million every week. So for the players who don't have access, they still have access to an event where they could win $360,000 at the end of the week. That would be a good thing, right? I think that would be a good thing. Then you have $3 million tournaments for the Corn Ferry Tour finals. Like just double the money across the schedule. We're talking chump change here relative to that $3 billion potential SSG investment, right? Do that. You shore up the Corn Ferry Tour. Good thing there. You make the PGA Tour smaller, more appealing. That's a good thing there. I think those are beneficial investments, beneficial changes to everybody, except, unfortunately, the people who kind of get cut out of that. I think that's better for the product. That all said, the FedEx Cup playoffs need fixing. And we have talked about this quite literally every year since the FedEx Cup started in 2007, and Tiger Woods could win the FedEx Cup without even basically playing the Tour Championship. And that all Vijay Singh had to do in 2008 was hit one shot and he won the Tour Championship. Or won the FedEx Cup. Those early years where there really was no implication that all of the playoffs mattered. And we've come all the way around to that too, having a net tournament, right? I don't. The format of the Tour Championship is what it is. I'm fine with it, to be honest with you. I kind of enjoy it. But what my problem with the playoffs is that the sites really don't make sense. They don't. I mean, I like Atlanta. I like East Lake. And I'm sure that the work that's been put in there is incredible. And I'm fine with having Atlanta be the annual end destination for the PGA Tour. However, you have two FedEx Cup playoff events in the FedEx St. Jude Championship and the BMW Championship. And the BMW Championship has kind of already employed this model that I would like to talk about. But it's moving around. You need to move these tournaments around. There are a lot of gripes from people in the online golf community and X and other places. Like, I can't believe the PGA Tour isn't in New York, Boston, or Chicago every single year. And you are absolutely right. Those are incredible golf cities with tremendous support. And the PGA Tour has basically abdicated any sense of having a presence in the northeastern part of the United States. I would throw DC into there to a degree, but the BMW has been going to Baltimore, went, 3 years ago? It will come back next year. Can't wait to have it. It's going to be awesome. But the BMW has done the right thing. The Western Golf Association, the Evans Scholars Foundation, they've decided to take the tournament around to different places because that allows them to post up Evans Scholars Foundation's sites and opportunities for kids who get scholarships through caddying by doing in different cities. Done and done. That is great. Keep doing it. The outlier to this then is Memphis, the FedEx St. Jude Championship. Poor ratings. It's not a poor golf course. It's just one with no juice. The boys at the Fried Egg call it TPC Initech because it's right by an office park. It isn't particularly special. It doesn't rate particularly well. And people don't tune in to watch it on TV. I'm sure the people of Memphis are very happy to have one of the best fields of the year every year coming to their community, even in the dog days of August when, like this year, the feels like temperature, the heat index temperature was like 107, 110, which is mind-boggling. And I'm sure the FedEx is really happy to have it right in their corporate backyard. But this tournament should move around, just like the BMW Championship does. And what I would like to see the PGA Tour do from a business standpoint, may not benefit you and me from a business standpoint, but could benefit us from a watch perspective. What I would like to see them do is bid out the first two playoff events. Go and do what WWE has started doing. They have started to go to municipalities and say, hey, we want to have WrestleMania here. We want to have the Royal Rumble here. We want to have Hot SummerSlam or Hot WrestleMania, which is SummerSlam, here. What can you give us in terms of resources that we can bring our big events to you? Let us use your stadiums for less amount of money for rent for that weekend. We'll schedule events at different places around town. Can you subsidize those? Can you get us those venues? Help us set that up. Will you kick back to us some money because you're going to get millions upon millions of people who fly in for these special events and spend money in your city? Go do that. There are so many different cities in this country that would love to have a FedEx Cup playoff event. And yes, some of them I've mentioned. New York, Boston, Washington, D.C. area. Certainly Chicago, Minneapolis, even though they've got a regular one. Atlanta has the home of the playoffs. What about Dallas? What about Houston? San Diego? I realize there are regular stops for a lot of these cities as well. But there's so many incredible venues that you could take a limited field event to. And if you get the right investment, you can make all the logistics work super smoothly. I think this is the future for the PGA Tour. And this is a good way to put some return back to these SSG investments. I think you should do it for all the signature events, to be honest with you. But start with the playoffs. Start by saying, hey, let's bring back, you know, the let's bring back this idea that we can move this thing around like a major. And I think they teased that at some point in the past and then just never really got going with it. And they kind of fought between having tournaments in the playoffs that were rooted somewhere, like the New York, New Jersey events. And they wanted to move those from venues, but not from city to city. You had the Boston event that was always at TPC Boston, which, whatever. And then you had the BMW, which was like, all right, well, we'll be in Chicago and somewhere else. Well, now that's not the case. That's everywhere else. And then you've had Atlanta. I think if you do this right, you can not only make a lot of money in your new for-profit business, but you can also raise a lot of money for local communities. You can also serve fans who don't normally get to see the PGA Tour year to year. I think this could be a win for everybody. It would be a pretty simple thing to do, right? I don't think you would struggle to make the connection to municipalities and the amount of money that these events can bring, especially if you elevate them to the level like they're treated like a major championship. Like, we're coming years in advance. We're selling tickets. Best players in the world are coming to these top venues. Not, no offense, not second tier courses, not mids, so to speak. None of that. And we'll talk about Country Club Snob another day. But what you bring them to the best of the best. If you can do that, I think you have such a tremendous opportunity to make the playoffs better. Because what people watch for the majors is tradition and history and relevance and importance laid upon it because of that history and tradition. Build a new tradition. Go take these places. Go put a lot of just oomph behind it. I think it's a benefit for everyone in the long haul. All right, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Again, I know it's been a couple of weeks. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me. Back home now and finishing up everything with getting GNN TV off the ground. Kids are getting ready for school, so I'll actually be around to do shows, which is great. Please leave me a comment, either in the stream, whether you're catching it live, after the fact on YouTube or Facebook, whether you're listening through your favorite podcasting platform. You can email me, ryan@thegolfnewsnet.com, on Twitter, Threads, X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, at Ryan Ballingy Golf, or Ryan Ballingy on Facebook and YouTube, Ryan Ballingy Golf. Before I get through the wrap-up of the show, LinkedIn user sent in a question. What about a PGA event in the Pacific Northwest? I want to just tout that for just a quick second because I think this is very relevant before we say goodbye. That right there, that is it. What about an event in the PGA or in the Northwest? What about an event in Seattle? What about an event in Portland? It should be there. I would even extend Northern California to that to a degree. That is such a great part of the golf world that gets basically no love from anybody. I mean, I know Sahali had a major championship this year for the first time in a decade, but that is an incredible community for golf. And yes, you may not want to have an event there every year for whatever sponsor reasons, but you could take a playoff event there, have it on the West Coast, have it in prime time, let people love it. More people watch golf in prime time. You saw that with the Memphis ratings. When the tournament ended at 8 o'clock for Lucas freaking Glover, 3.2 million people watched it. When Hideki Matsuyama, one of the best players and a major champion, won in the regular time zone, regular time slot, 6 p.m. Eastern, 1 million less people watched it. So getting these tournaments in prime time as much as possible is a great thing, a truly great thing. So thank you for sending that in. Appreciate that question. All right. Again, Facebook, Twitter, or X, Threads, Instagram, all those places. I'm at Ryan Ballingy or Ryan Ballingy Golf. Well, Facebook and YouTube's Ryan Ballingy Golf. Golf News Net's on all those services at the handle Golf News Net. Back tomorrow with another show. More to talk about. I'm going to talk about Country Club Snob tomorrow a little bit. And that's okay. If you don't know who he is, we'll talk about it a little bit. I think it's kind of interesting since I didn't get a chance to weigh on that. Talk about the start of the AIG Women's Open, which sounds like it's going to be a weather lottery at the old course at St. Andrews. Cannot wait to watch that. Please tune in and check it out. And then we'll talk a little bit about the start of the playoffs at Castle Pines at the very lovely altitude of 6,200 feet, playing on an 8,100-yard golf course. Should be a fascinating week. Thanks so much for spending some time with me. We will talk to you next time on Two Off the First. Have a good one, everyone.